Hello friends, welcome back to my channel. Today we are going to discuss about the Lagrange's theorem in group theory. And as you know that in group theory, Lagrange's theorem is one of the most important theorem and it is the central theorem of the algebra. So let us see what is the statement of Lagrange's theorem. So Lagrange's theorem says that the order of the subgroup divides order of the group. So when we are talking about the order, that means we are talking about finite groups. So you have a finite group G and its subgroup H, and the theorem says that order of the subgroup divides order of the group. Or in notations, I have written like this: order of H divides order of G. Here G is a finite group. Moreover, the number of distinct left or right cosets of H in G is order of G upon order of H. This is the number of distinct left cosets. It is also called the index. So index of H in G. So now let us prove this Lagrange's theorem. So we have taken a finite group. So let G be a finite group and let A1H, A2H, ARH denote the distinct left cosets of H in G. So H was your subgroup of G, and as we have taken G to be finite group, so it has finite number of elements. So let A1, A2, AR, these are distinct elements of the group, and for corresponding to every element of the group, you will have a coset. So for A1, you have A1H, for A2, you have A2H, and for AR, you have ARH. So these are distinct left cosets of H in G. And we know that union of distinct left cosets is equal to the group. So A1H union A2H union A3H and so on, union ARH, this is equal to your group G. So these two sides are equal. That means the order of left hand side is equal to order of right hand side. That means order of A1H union A2H union A3H and so on, union ARH is equal to order of G. So what is this this order of this whole thing? If we break that, that means that will be equal to order of A1H plus order of A2H plus order of A3H and so on plus order of ARH. And you know that order of this subgroup is order of the coset is equal to order of the subgroup. So order of A1H will be equal to order of H. So this whole thing will be equal to order of H plus order of H plus order of H R times. So let us see how we have written all these things. So you have a finite group G and it has some elements A1, A2, AR. These are the cosets that we have considered A1H, A2H, ARH. So we are saying that corresponding to every element of the group, you will have a coset. So this for every A in G, you have some AIH. That we have considered A1, A1H, A2H, ARH. So for every A in G, you will that will be equal to some AIH. And we know that the representative element of the coset belong to the coset. So if you have a left coset H, then this A is called the representative element. And in the previous video where I have discussed the properties of cosets, there we have proved that the representative element belongs to the coset. So A belongs to AH. Thus, that means each member of G belongs to one of the coset AIH. And that we have written that this is equal to this. This result we have already proved in those properties that if you have two cosets, two left cosets AH and BH, then either AH is equal to BH, that means either they are same, or AH intersection BH is equal to phi. There is nothing in the intersection of these two cosets. So this means that the union in this one is disjoint, this union is disjoint. That means order of both the sides is equal. When the union is disjoint, then only we can say that the order of both the sides is equal. So order of G is equal to order of this whole thing. And this can be broken down like this because the union is disjoint. That's why we are doing this is equal to order of A1H plus order of A2H plus order of ARH. And as I told you that order of the coset is equal to order of the subgroup. So order of A1H is equal to order of H, order of A2H is equal to order of H, order of ARH is also equal to order of H. Now these are order H plus order of H plus order of H R times. So this will be equal to R into order of H. So order of G is equal to R into order of H, and this implies that order of H divides order of G, because you have written order of G as order of H into some R, some positive integer R. So order of H divides order of G. Also, you can say that R is equal to order of G upon order of H. And what is your R? Your R is the number of distinct left cosets that you have taken. So the number of distinct left cosets, or you can say the index, will be equal to order of G upon order of H. So this was our Lagrange's theorem. The proof is really very simple. Once you know that the group is finite, and you know these one or two results, that this result is very important, that when you have two cosets, then they either they are same or there is nothing common. So because we have taken the distinct cosets, so they have empty intersection, so order of these two sides will be equal, and then just 2-3 lines, and this proof is complete. So Lagrange's theorem's proof is very, very simple once you know these two results. Now there are some corollaries of Lagrange's theorem. This first corollary says that order of A divides order of G. This A is some element of the group. We are saying that order of an element of the group divides order of the group. In a finite group, the order of each element of the group divides the order of the group. Let us prove it by using Lagrange's theorem. So this is just a corollary, so it will be derived from that Lagrange's theorem only. And Lagrange's theorem says that order of the subgroup divides order of the group. And now you just remember the cyclic groups. Cyclic groups we have already seen. Cyclic group means the whole group is generated by a single element. And if you have a cyclic group which is generated by A, then order of the cyclic group is equal to order of the element. That thing we have already seen. Now let us see the proof. We know that order of an element is equal to the order of the subgroup generated by that element, or you can say order of A is equal to order of that subgroup which is generated by A. And by Lagrange's theorem, we know that order of the subgroup divides order of the group. That means order of this subgroup which is generated by A divides order of the group, and this thing is equal to order of A. So the proof is done. So order of A divides order of G. So you take any element of a group, then order of the element divides order of the group. Now this is second corollary. It says that the groups of prime order are cyclic. A group which is finite and it has prime order, then the group is cyclic group. Cyclic means it is generated by a single element. Now, suppose that you have a group G and its order is P, where P is some prime number. Now, let A belongs to G. A is a non-identity element. So, then order of that from corollary 1, we have seen that order of this subgroup which is generated by A, this will divide order of the group, and your this subgroup which is generated by A, that its order will be not equal to 1. Why? Because A is not equal to identity. So if it is equal to identity, then you take any power of identity, you will get identity only. Then there will be only one element, but we are not taking it equal to identity. So order of this subgroup which is generated by A, this is not equal to 1. Now, this implies that order of this subgroup which is generated by A, this is equal to order of group. Why? Because we have taken order of G to be a prime number. So a prime number has only two divisors, 1 and itself. So if it is not equal to 1, then this has to be equal to order of G, which is your P. And hence this group G is equal to this group which is generated by A. That means it is cyclic, and hence a group of prime order is cyclic. Now this is the third corollary of Lagrange's theorem, and this corollary says that if you take a group G which is finite and there is some element A in G, then you take this A to the power order of G. You are raising A to the power of some number, that is n, which suppose n is the order of the group G, then A to the power n is equal to identity. That we have to show. Now by corollary 1, we have proved that order of an element divides order of the group. So order of A divides order of G. That means order of G is equal to order of A into some positive integer k. Now you take A to the power order of G is equal to A to the power this thing, order of A into k, and A to the power order of A is equal to identity. Everyone knows that. So if your order of A is n, then A to the power n is equal to identity. So A to the power order of A is equal to identity, and identity to the power k is equal to identity. So A to the power order of G is equal to identity. So this is your corollary 3. So you have seen Lagrange's theorem. Lagrange's theorem, and this is, let us see once again all these results. So Lagrange's theorem says that if you have a finite group, then order of the subgroup divides order of the group. So here G was your group and finite group, and H is the H is the subgroup. Then order of H divides order of G, and your order of G upon order of H, that gives the index of H in G, odd number of distinct left cosets, odd number of distinct right cosets. So this corollary was saying that order of an element divides order of the group. Corollary 2 was saying that all groups of prime order are cyclic. And corollary 3 says that A to the power order of G gives you the identity element. Now this is fourth corollary. This is Fermat's little theorem. This is also very important. Fermat's little theorem. Fermat's little theorem is used in many applications where you have to just simplify the calculations when you have to calculate the higher powers. So that time it is useful. So what is Fermat's little theorem? Let us see. For every integer a and every prime p, a to the power p modulo p. So what we are doing, you have an element a for every integer a. A is your integer and you are taking pth power of a to the power p modulo p. Then a to the power p modulo p by Fermat's little theorem, it is equal to a. Or in notations, you can say that a to the power p is congruent to a modulo p. Or we can say, if you can take this a on the left hand side, then this becomes a to the power p minus 1 is congruent to 1 modulo p. Or you can say that a to the power phi p, and you know what is your phi p, phi n. We have already seen the definition of this function. This is a number theoretic function phi n, where phi n is the Euler phi function, and it is defined like this. The phi n is equal to the number of positive integers less than n and relatively prime to n. So if you have a prime number p, then what is the number of positive integers which are less than p and relatively prime to p? So that is your p minus 1, because every number which is less than p will be relatively prime to p. So your phi p will be equal to p minus 1. So when we are saying a to the power p minus 1 is congruent to 1 modulo p, then we can also say that a to the power phi p is congruent to 1 modulo p. So you can see the statement of Fermat's little theorem in any of these forms. Now we are going to prove this Fermat's little theorem as a corollary of Lagrange's theorem. Now, and this is the notation un. Un, we have already seen what is un. Un is another number theoretic function. Un is the set of basically un is the set where you are taking all the positive integers which are less than n and relatively prime to n. In phi n we were saying the number of positive integers less than n and relatively prime to n. That is the, you can say that phi n is the order of un. Un is a set and phi n is the order of that set. So un is a set, basically it is not a number theoretic function. Un is a set. Un is a set where you are taking all the positive integers which are less than n and relatively prime to n. So order of un is equal to phi n. Now, given that n is prime, so if n is prime, then phi p is equal to p minus 1. When n is equal to some prime p, then phi p is equal to p minus 1, as I explained you earlier. Therefore, a to the power order of up. So order of up is what? Order of up is phi p. So a to the power order of up is equal to a to the power phi p, and phi p is p minus 1. Suppose this is 1. And by corollary 3, we have proved that a to the power order of g is equal to identity. And un forms a, and this thing we have already seen, that un forms a group under multiplication modulo n. If you have this set un is the positive integers less than n relatively prime to n, a set where you have all the positive integers which are less than n relatively prime to n, then that set un forms a multiplicative group. It forms a group under multiplication modulo n. So therefore a to the power order of up will also be equal to identity. And this, when you are talking about positive integers, then their identity is your 1. So identity is equal to 1 in un. Suppose this is your 2, then this your 1 was a to the power order of up is equal to a to the power p minus 1. And in number 2, we are saying a to the power order of up is equal to 1. So from 1 and 2, this implies that a to the power phi p is congruent to 1 modulo p, or you can say a to the power p minus 1 is congruent to 1 modulo p, or you can say that a to the power p is congruent to a modulo p. So this was your Fermat's little theorem. Now let us discuss the, so Lagrange's theorem we have seen. These 4 corollaries also. Now we are talking about the converse of Lagrange's theorem. So Lagrange's theorem says that order of the subgroup divides order of the group, where G is a finite group. So what will be the converse of Lagrange's theorem? Converse of Lagrange's theorem will be like this. If you have some number, positive integer, which is divisor of order of the group, then you should have a subgroup of that order. That will be your converse of Lagrange's theorem. But it is not necessary that you will always get a subgroup of that equal to that divisor. So let us read this statement once. The converse of Lagrange's theorem is not true. That is, if M divides order of G, then G need not have a subgroup of order M. So for that, we have given a counterexample. So S4, you already know what is S4. S4 is the group of all permutations defined on this set 1, 2, 3, 4. And A4 also, we know that A4 will be the collection of all the even permutations in S4. And the result that we have already seen is the order of A4 is equal to half of order of S4. So order of Sn, we know that order of Sn is factorial n. So order of S4 is factorial 4, and factorial 4 is 12. Factorial 4 is 24. So order of A4 will be equal to factorial 4 upon 2, that is 12. So order of A4 is 12. And we know that if when you are talking about A, and then that itself becomes a group. This is called alternating group of degree n. So when we are talking about A4, A4 is a group of order 12. Now 6 is a divisor of 12. So, or we can say 6 is the divisor of order of A4, but A4 does not have any subgroup which has order 6. So this was the example where we have shown that converse of Lagrange's theorem is not true. Now this is a remark for the condition where we can see that the converse of Lagrange's theorem is true. The converse of Lagrange's theorem holds in case of finite cyclic groups. So in chapter 4 of cyclic groups, when we have seen this, there was theorem in the book of Galilean in chapter 4 of cyclic groups, you can refer to theorem 4.3, where we have given a fundamental theorem of cyclic groups. And in the fundamental theorem of cyclic groups, that was the basically the converse of Lagrange's theorem. So when you have a finite cyclic group, then in that case, converse of Lagrange's theorem is true. And that statement is given here. The theorem says that if G is a cyclic group, then if cyclic group, that means it will be generated by some element. So order of G is equal to order of this group which is generated by A. So basically G is equal to A. This group which is generated by A, and it is finite. So it has order n. Then the theorem says that for each positive divisor K of n, the group which is generated by A, that is your group G, has exactly one subgroup of order K. You have a finite cyclic group of order n. You take any divisor of that n, then you will have a unique subgroup of that order. And that unique subgroup will be generated by this element a to the power n upon k. So this is called fundamental theorem of cyclic groups. And here we have seen that converse of Lagrange's theorem is true. So in this lecture, we have seen the Lagrange's theorem, the corollaries which are related to Lagrange's theorem, and in what conditions we say that the converse of Lagrange's theorem is true. So hope you like it. In the next video, we are going to see some examples and some more properties related to groups. So till then, bye-bye. Take care.